Total here, and today we're doing another tier list using Tier Maker, this time covering every new hero introduced into Total War Warhammer 3. So before we get started with that, I do need to let you guys know that this video here is sponsored by Manscaped. So I've been partnered with Manscaped for a while now. I tossed out my old razor a while back, and I've been using the lawnmower on my face because it just gives a quicker, cleaner cut than my previous razor did. And that's really the crux of why I like to support Manscaped, because it allows me to take some care of my personal appearance with the minimal amount of time and effort needed. But that's not really the main reason what I'm talking to you about Manscaped today. What we really want to do is raise awareness for their partnership with the Testicular Cancer Society, which hopes to spread awareness about cancer prevention and support individuals and families impacted by testicular cancer. So just a few statistics for you. About 98% of people that watch this video will actually have balls, because about 98% of you guys are men. And when it comes to testicular cancer, apparently 1 in 270 people, roughly, will develop testicular cancer at some point in their life. So this has already got me thinking I should bloody check my nuts. And if you're thinking the same thing, then maybe you should do that too. But if you want to learn a little bit more about this and support their partnership with the Testicular Cancer Society, click on the link in the description below and check out their products and check out their partnership with the Testicular Cancer Society. They've also sent me a t-shirt that I'll be wearing throughout live streams over the next few days to help support their efforts with testicular cancer. Okay, moving on to the tier list itself. It's really important before we put anyone anywhere is to get an idea of how we should go about evaluating them. It's really important to identify what each individual hero's speciality is, and then rating them on how good they are at that role. If we, for example, judged the Patriarch at how good they are at spellcasting, that's kind of stupid because it's not a spellcaster, that's not their role. So it's really important to identify what their role is and then how good they are at that role. Okay, so first thing we're going to do here is identify all of the cultists at the same time, and then do all of the demon heroes at the same time, because there's a lot of overlap in how these guys perform. So I'll be going back and forth through the four different heroes as we go through the tier list. So starting with the Khorne hero, the Khorne cultist, we're going to go B tier, this one here, B tier, A tier, A tier. So the reason why these two are in B tier, and by the way, I think that B tier is kind of like, it's like a good hero, but that's neither overpowered nor underpowered, whereas A tier is maybe just like slightly overpowered, where they're very good at their specific role, and then S tier is like they're really, really good at their role. Another thing to identify as well is that in Total Warhammer 3, they increased the level cap to 50. Some of these heroes can spend all of those points and still have leftover points to distribute, which isn't a good thing. So if you level a character up to level 50, they will have 49 skill points. That means that they don't have 49 skills across their entire skill tree. Now, there are some heroes in here that have so many skills that you can spend all 49 points and essentially not achieve everything that you would want. Whereas, again, some of them would just get a whole bunch of stuff that you don't want, like loads of blue line skills that you would never use, right? So that will be taken into consideration as well. All right, now, with the Khorne cultist, this one here, just baseline, this is a good hero. All of the cultists provide campaign movement range when attached to an army. This is something that doesn't stack, so you only need one of them to attach to an army. Having multiple doesn't add on to the effect. So I think it goes up to 25%. So for example, having 4 of them attached to an army isn't going to give you 100%. So you only need to really attach one of these into each army. Now, the Khorne cultist, this guy here is just essentially a good melee fighter. Not the greatest melee fighter ever. He will not be able to go toe-to-toe with a Blood Reaper. But in terms of the other 4 cultists, he's probably the best melee fighter. The Nurgle dude here, this guy is the tankiest because he's got passive regeneration, but a Khorne cultist will probably beat him in a duel. The Cinch cultist, this guy here can't fight very well at all in melee, but he does have access to barrier. This one here is a spellcaster. Now he's got access to the Law of Fire. This guy here will outkill all the others combined in any given battle, provided you actually use his magic. So this is the only character that any of the demons have access to that has access to fire magic, which is one of the best laws of magic in the game. It's a relatively cheap law of magic, and it's incredibly devastating if used correctly, especially Flamestorm. On huge clumps of infantry can just do huge amounts of damage. So that's the primary reason why this one's getting into A tier, just because of fire magic. And the Slaanesh Cultist, this one here is probably the least valuable on the battlefield. Will probably lose in a fight versus the Nurgle and the Khorne one. So why is it at A tier? Well, because this one here, you attach it into the army just for the campaign movement range, and of course for the summons. We'll get to the summons in a minute. But this one here has got another role. You send this one out into the world to create new cults, and also to do agent actions on other lords so that you can get devotees. So since devotees are a very valuable resource for Slaanesh, and this is your primary way of getting tons of them, that's why it's getting up into A tier. Now, all of them as well are able to summon 3 lesser demons of their respective god, and a greater demon. So the lesser demons being the Bloodletters, Plague Bearers, Horrors, or Demonettes, greater demons being the Bloodthirster, Great Unclean One, Lord of Change, Keeper of Secrets. So overall, pretty good heroes, but that's the tier list for them. Now we move on to the other demonic heroes. I think that the Blood Reaper goes into A tier, the Nurgle Plague Ridden goes into S tier, the Iridescent Horror into A tier, and the Allurus goes into S tier as well. So, starting with the Blood Reaper, this is actually a really good unit to use in a Doom stack, especially if you're playing as Chaos Undivided. No, you don't even need to, it doesn't even matter, because I was just thinking about having a healer. But they don't need to heal if you put them on a Blood Throne. These guys are really good at capping points, whether you put them on a Blood Throne or a Juggernaut. They're very good in melee. They can easily take on, like if you've got a bunch of them, they can easily take on entire armies by themselves and barely take any damage. Good amounts of regen, good amount of pushing power. They can get out of combat quite easily. Good animations, which needs to be taken into consideration. They've got some good abilities that will, good active abilities. Each of these heroes has 1 of 3 active abilities. Some of the active abilities aren't that good, I'm not even going to mention them, but the ones to note with the Blood Reaper is the weapon strength one and the big boost to melee attack. Those are the ones that I tend to go for them. Then we've got the Iridescent Horror. Not good in a melee fight, obviously, but it's a missile hero, and there's not too many missile heroes in the game. So, and it can fly. So it's got 2 mounts. It's got the Burning Chariot and the Flying Disc. Personally, I prefer the Flying Disc because it's smaller and faster. But if you want better melee capabilities, you go with the Burning Chariot. But I don't usually try to cover all bases. I just usually want someone to be fast. So it's on its own, it's able to do a fair bit of damage just with its missile attack. It doesn't have that much ammunition, but it still does a bit. And then it's a good spellcaster. It's also able to summon additional horrors or provide a huge boost to recharge rates of your magic. So they can be used as massive magic batteries. Very useful if you want to make use of the unlimited magic exploit, which is still in the game at the moment, but it could be patched sometime soon. Maybe, we'll see. But currently, that's very useful. Then we've got these 2 over here. Now, why did these 2 get S tier and these ones get A tier? It's because these ones here, their skill line is better. If we have a look at these 2, this one here only really has a melee line, no spellcasters. This one here is only a spellcaster, no melee line. And both of these have both a spellcaster line and a melee line, so they can make better use of being at level 50. Their maximum potential is higher than them, just because these ones kind of like cap out at like rank 20 to 30. Once they reach that point, they don't really get any stronger. Whereas these keep getting stronger all the way up to rank 50. So with the Plague Ridden, you've got access to either the Law of Nurgle or the Law of Death. Currently, the Law of Death is very useful for activating the Unlimited Winds of Magic exploit. And Law of Nurgle is really good if you've got a huge blob of healing, but it is a very expensive Law of Magic. So having 2 Plague Riddens, one with Death, one with the Law of Nurgle, can be very useful to make sure you've got essentially unlimited Winds of Magic and very powerful spells. Because the Law of Death spells on their own are a bit meh. But yeah, you've also got access to a flying mount with the Rotfly, which is not one of the better flying mounts. It's actually got kind of low mass. It gets stuck really easily, but it's not a terrible fighter as a single entity, and they're reasonably fast, so as long as you avoid combat with them, they won't, well, avoid combat with stuff that you don't want to fight, he should be fine. So, good melee fighter. Their abilities are also especially good. You've got an area of effect heal, or you've got a area of effect damage ability, which is usually what I like to go for, because that one there is extremely powerful at taking out a lot of melee infantry. Really, really good hero, that one. Then we've got the Ogres. So this one here on a Seeker Chariot, a whole bunch of them together can be very powerful. So you've got access to the Lore of Shadows or the Lore of Slanesh. Personally, I think that the Lore of Slanesh is garbage, but the Lore of Shadows is really bloody good, even with the Penumbral Pendulum nerf. These ones here on Seeker Chariots can get super quick. They've got buffs to increase their speed even further, or debuff the enemy with reduced melee defense. They can punch right through enemy infantry super easily now that the chariot bug has been fixed. So these ones are able to do a ton of damage to infantry-based armies. But I'd be very wary about using them against large single entities. They're not very good against that. But yeah, against a whole bunch of infantry, really good at it. I guess you could just use your magic to debuff them with the large single entities. We've had Doom stacks sent in of the Allurus and with the Blood Reaper, and both of them performed really good. Okay, now moving on to the Mortal followers, starting with the Patriarch. So this guy here, comparing it to the ones that have come before, is a little bit on the bland side. He's provides replenishment when attached into the army, which is definitely useful, but Kislev already has plenty of replenishment because it can get a fair bit of replenishment through Lord skills, through technologies. It's just not that big of an issue, but it definitely helps if you're going into red territory, so that is very useful. In terms of what they provide to the army, you've got a passive heal, or a melee attack buff, or a fatigue reduction buff, so those are all good. You only get one out of those three, and of course they get a bear mount, so they're a good melee fighter and they can provide you with that replenishment. I'm going to put them at B tier because they feel about the same tier as these two here. Good fighters, but nothing like incredibly powerful, although if you play as start as Castalton, an extra 20% ward save would probably mean that these would be A tier. So this is without that buff. So think of it like this. If you're playing as Katerin or Boris, they're B tier, but if you're playing as Castalton, they go up to A tier because they become a lot stronger. So we'll put it down here just for now, but just it's somewhere between there basically. Then we've got the Ice Witch. So this one here has got access to the Lore of Ice or the Lore of Tempest. Now, I think that these are some of the worst laws of magic in the game. Both of them suck, in my opinion. But it's better to have some magic than no magic, and they do have other utility aside from that. They've actually got a lot of different abilities. You've got a no winds of magic cost summon of a snow leopard, which is pretty useful. They've got a war bear mount. They're not terrible in melee. They also can get really good traits through the Ice Court mechanic. Some notable examples are the ones that reduce the upkeep cost by 30% of War Sleds and Little Groms. Or, sorry, that's War Sleds or the one that provides reduced upkeep for Little Groms. So you can have Doom stacks of those that are very powerful that are almost free of upkeep cost. There's various other ones as well, like extra melee attack for the entire army, extra weapon strength or charge bonus for the for cavalry, extra missile strength for Ice Guard, all that kind of stuff. Loads of really good traits, so they provide a lot of extra support. Even if their Lore of Magic isn't particularly good, all of their other areas make up for it. So that's why they're going into A tier there. Okay, now we move on to the Ogres, where we've got the Hunter. Now, this guy here is S tier. Such a good hero here. This is probably the best melee fighter hero out of any of them. I think in a one-on-one fight, a maxed out Hunter versus a maxed out any one of these guys, a Hunter would win. That's primarily because a Hunter has access to a Stonehorn mount, which is just one of the strongest creatures in the game. Super, super bloody strong. On top of that, they provide extra campaign movement range when attached into an army, extra growth in the local province. They provide loads of different buffs to various different units. Notable ones are like the ones that's provided to Saber Tusks, so you could get a bunch of Hunters in an army and have essentially free Saber Tusks. So they've got a lot of utility with them. But really their main strength is just being able to have a Stonehorn mount fairly early on. Very, very powerful. Then we've got the Butcher. Okay, so Butcher is an A tier mount. These guys, sorry, not mount, hero. These guys here don't get a mount, but they, when attached to an army, increases the replenishment rate for it, which is very useful. They've got access to the Lore of Beasts and the Lore of the Great Maw. Generally speaking, if you're going to go with single entity based armies, you want to go with the Great Maw. If not, you probably want to go with the Lore of the Beasts, because the Lore of the Great Maw is very expensive, and the heal spells, they're best used on single entities. Whereas Lore of Beasts is relatively cheap and can dish out a decent amount of damage in blobs, which the Ogres tend to blob up a fair bit. It depends on how you play them, I guess. But yeah, their spellcasting ability is okay. They can have passive regen. They're pretty good spellcasters. Okay in melee. So A tier for them. You know, decent amount of utility. Then we've got the Fire Belly. Also going into A tier because it is a fire caster. Now I don't think it's got as much utility as the Butcher, but if you really want a damaging Lore of Magic, you can't go wrong with fire magic. So what you can do is attach this guy here for the healer if you need it, but this one here you attach for the killing power. This is your best Lore of Magic. As the Ogres. He's also got some other abilities like Explosion and whatnot, and those are okay, but primarily, this guy here is a decent melee fighter that's got access to fire magic, but no access to mounts. So these two here provide good support for hunters, but hunters are really, really freaking good. Now, looking at this at the moment, we're seeing a lot of A tier, a bit of S tier, a bit of B tier, but no C and D tier. That's because all of these heroes are really good. These two heroes, however, for Cathay, not so good. I'm going to put the Alchemist at C tier and the Astromancer at D tier. Honestly, this was one of the things that I gave criticism to CA about behind the scenes in early access. I said that they needed to take another look at the skill lines of these heroes here, because these look like skill lines from Warhammer 1. They are bland and just not good. Both of these Laws of Magic have been around since day one. You've got Lore of Metal and Lore of Heavens. Now, both of those Laws of Magic are fine. The problem here is that Cathay Lords are pretty much all spellcasters. You do have access to one that isn't, but that's trash. Don't get Magistrates. They're terrible, right? So you either want to have your Dragon Lords or the Shugengen, whatever they're called, Lords. And they've got access to the Lore of Yin and Yang. And both of those Laws of Magic are pretty good. Now, since you've got a limited amount of Winds of Magic, unless you've got the Jade Amulet and you activate the unlimited Winds of Magic, you don't really need the Lore of Metal or the Lore of Heavens as Cathay. They're both not bad, don't get me wrong. But, you know, comparing it to the others here, these have extremely low utility. At least this one here attached to an army does provide campaign movement range, but that's about it. It does have some abilities that provide small buffs to singular units, which I don't value very much at all. They both have access to horse mounts. They're both terrible in melee. Even if you give them amazing equipment, these guys here will not fare well against any of these other heroes here. They're not good single entities, so they're very squishy. This one here does have the Wujing War Compass, which some people like. Me personally, I don't really care much for it because the main benefit to a Wujing War Compass is just 20% extra recharge rate, which, that's okay, but you're losing a lot of speed and having a unit that, if it gets caught and surrounded, can get killed pretty quickly. And yeah, and just in terms of their spellcasting ability, it's just we've seen that, done that, and these are the heroes that at level 50 will have leftover skill points even after you put points into everything else. So Creative Assembly really need to have another look at these two heroes here and just give them some more skills, whether that be some better mounts. You know, giving this one here a Sky Junk mount would immediately put it up to A tier. You know, giving this one here a Terracotta Sentinel mount, again, that would make it so much better. But yeah, they just need some more skills, I think, because they're really falling behind all these other guys here. All of them have either got summons, utility, and these ones here, the only one that's got utility is this one here with campaign movement range. This guy here has basically got no utility at all. It just provides essentially a bit of public order in the local area, but apart from that, they're very useless. Anyway, that's my tier list there. Let me know in the comments below what you feel about this particular tier list. I'm open to revisiting this later down the track as more heroes get added, as new races and new heroes as DLCs come in. So we'll probably come back to this at a later date. Don't forget to check out Manscaped, link in the description below. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time, fuckers. Bye.